All right, guys, I want to welcome everybody to our Tuesday Nomberg Law Live. We do these each Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. And as I usually say, we have interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And my guest today is Dan Wolken, a national columnist with USA Today in sports. Dan, welcome, and I appreciate you making some time today.
No, thanks for having me.
Well, I know that it's during this pandemic, the world has turned upside down, of course, but so has the sports world, of course. And most recently, we just saw in the Super Bowl with the way that they dealt with it, and how all major sports and all the way down to little leagues are having to deal with it. But before we jump into those current topics, Dan, I want to jump back a little bit about we have a mutual connection with the university, Vanderbilt University. I know that you were an undergraduate there and you spent time working on the Vanderbilt Hustler, which has over the last few decades has really gained a lot of notoriety. There's so many of your colleagues in national positions around the country. I want you to kind of share a little bit of that experience that you had as an undergraduate, and who are your other colleagues of note around the country who you know of?
Yeah, well, it was one of those things that when I got to Vanderbilt, when I got to college, it's what I threw myself into. You know, some people throw themselves into a fraternity or sorority or uh, intramural sports or varsity sports or Spanish club or debate team or whatever it may be. Mine was the student newspaper, and it was the place where spent a lot of time when I wasn't studying, when I wasn't in class. Was always in the office. Got heavily involved as a writer, as an editor. Um, Back in those days, we put out the paper twice a week, and we basically pulled all nighters to get it out. And it was a big deal on campus when the Hustler landed in newspaper boxes every, I think it was Tuesday and Friday or something like that. And we would be in there literally all night long putting the issue together. We had to paste it up on boards. They don't have to do that anymore now. It's all, kind of digital, but we literally had to cut and paste and put it on boards and deliver it to the printer at 6 a.m. And that's really the some of the best memories I have of college. Just the sense of accomplishment, the exhaustion of just putting everything into that. We'd usually go have breakfast afterwards, and then go get some sleep, and just over and over again. And I managed to do that, for 4 years, and was editor of the paper when I was there toward the end. And it was just it was awesome, and we did something really meaningful, not just in sports, where it was always cool to go cover football games, and certainly laid the foundation for what I do now, but also getting involved in big campus issues and breaking big stories and holding people accountable. And we didn't have a class, we didn't have a journalism school, but that was the best classroom you could have, was the real life experience of doing it.
Well, it's you were honing your craft, that's for sure. And I know you had a little bit of a smile on your face, maybe as you were remembering some of the memories of just being there so late. Now, I know this is kind of doing a deep dive, but I saw this past week that Rotier's restaurant is closing after 75 years. And that was a campus favorite, at least for me, being directly across the street from where I lived for 3 years at the Carmichael Towers. But where would be a breakfast spot for you guys when you put the paper to bed, so to speak?
It was always Pancake Pantry, which is out there in Hillsborough Village, just on the edge of the Vanderbilt campus. Certainly a pretty famous place in Nashville that every weekend, even still, you drive out there and there's a big line at 9 o'clock for people to get in. Back in those days, you could walk right in at 6 a.m. That was kind of what we did. But yeah, it was always Pancake Pantry.
Well, I know those were fond memories. Now, looking back on your years on campus, and coming forward. I know you've gone on to several of the newspapers, and you've most recently been with USA Today. Let's talk about some of the Vanderbilt colleagues who either were in school with you or preceded you or after you. There's just, whether it's, and these are just names off the top of my head, obviously Buster Olney is one, maybe one of the more notable ones just with his dealing with Major League Baseball. Willie Geist. I mean, I could go on and on, but who are some of your friends or colleagues around the country who were either with you at Vanderbilt or you have dealt with or know of just with the Vanderbilt connection?
Yeah, well, those guys are a little bit older than me, a little bit different generation. But when I got there, or as I was getting there, Tyler Kepner was leaving. You know, he's a longtime national baseball writer for the New York Times. I worked most closely with Lee Jenkins, who was with Sports Illustrated and now actually has a job working for the LA Clippers. But he was certainly, you know, one of the best sports writers in the country, doing NBA features and profiles at Sports Illustrated. I worked very closely with Neil Vigdor, who's a New York Times reporter, Will Tomlinson, who ended up sort of working for ESPN on the production side. So yeah, we had a lot of people who were very committed to our staff, very committed to getting that paper out every day and making it really good, and just really cared and put a lot into it. And so yeah, it was a great group of people.
I always, and maybe this is just my black and gold bias, but you don't have to go to the Missouris or the Syracuses of the world for J school. You guys certainly created your marks while in school and have set off for just some awesome paths of your own career wise.
Yeah, the thing about journalism is that there's no exact way to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
There's very different paths. There's some people who uh, do that very traditional, you know, J school thing. They go to Missouri, they go to Northwestern or Syracuse. There's certainly other really good journalism schools around the country, and they get that sort of formal training. Some people do it in grad school. You know, Columbia's got a very strong grad program that a lot of people I know were involved in. But it's also one of those jobs that there's a lot of people who are great at it who, frankly, don't have college degrees.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's some of it is just instinctual. You know, understanding what a story is and how to get a story, and there's a talent to that, and understanding people, knowing how to talk to people. It's also, I think, one of the jobs where it's most important to have on the ground experience. That's really the only way to learn. You can certainly understand and learn in classrooms some of the basics and some of the rules and ethics and all that stuff is very important. But in terms of actually how to do the job on a day-to-day basis, how to meet a deadline, how to write, how to get a story, how to interview people, you just have to watch and learn and do it and practice. So there's no right or wrong way. You know, there's really good journalists who went to journalism school and some really good ones who didn't. But like I said earlier, I think having the experience on a college campus of actually running a student paper is as good an experience as you could possibly have to prepare yourself to do.
Yeah, there's nothing better than the boots on the ground experience, the on the job training, and we'll move on from our Vanderbilt kick in just a minute. But I do have one more question along those lines. Is there is a renewed optimism, that's my term, within the football alumni with the latest coach, Coach Clark Lee, a former football player, walk on at Vanderbilt and a Nashville product himself. He's really starting to turn some heads. And he's hired a very vast wealth of experience in coaches. He's brought back 3 or 4 teammates and former Vanderbilt players, most notably Javon Hay and Earl Bennett were most recently announced that they were on staff. Um, what are you seeing? What are your thoughts about what Coach Lee is doing? And as well as Candace Lee, they're starting to put some money behind the program. The locker rooms have been gutted, and there's a long range plan that we think is going to be unraveled or unrolled in the next couple of months to years.
Yeah, well, I'd say first of all, my experience in covering college football for as many years as I have, and seeing coaches come and go, you always sort of have this honeymoon period when somebody gets a job, they're ramping up, they're putting a staff in place, they're bringing in their own people, and everything looks great. Everything on paper looks like the right decision, and they're going to put money into it, and they've got all these plans. You have to have that. You have to have a blueprint in place, and you have to execute it. And certainly, I think he's done that so far. But at the same time, this is the easiest part of the job, in the sense that you have not played any games. There's no pressure. There's no expectations that you haven't met yet. So I would certainly say that he's done everything right so far, but this is the time that it's hard to mess up.
Yeah.
We'll see what the things look like on the field uh, when they get into recruiting, but he's got a tough job, no doubt about it. That's a program that's in rough shape right now. They need huge investments. They need institutional commitment. I don't think he would have taken the job if he didn't feel like he had that. But at the same time, he's now responsible for executing as the football coach, and any first time head coach in college football, you never know how it's going to go. He may turn out to be Vanderbilt's Pat Fitzgerald, or he may flame out, and we'll just have to see.
Yeah, it's not enough. You're right. Not just to win that press conference. You now have to execute and put everything into place. So the time will tell. And I guess the term I should have used is guarded optimism. We've all been down that road so many times with prior coaches and seasons. So anyway, guys, I'm talking with Dan Wolken. He's a national writer with USA Today, dealing with sports, and it seems like you've covered at one point or another just about every sport that's out there and worth discussing. But let's talk about the Super Bowl that was just this past week. If you're assigned or tasked to write about the Super Bowl during this pandemic or any of these major sporting events that are going on, are you traveling or are you having to do your work remotely? Share with us a little bit about some of your experiences in the last 6 months to a year with that.
Yeah, no, it's different right now. The last year have not been to many sporting events in person. Went to the college football playoff game in Dallas. Went to the championship game. Went to the SEC championship game, which is where I live in Atlanta. Other than that, I didn't go to any other football games this year. I've covered several Super Bowls for USA Today. This year, we had a very small crew on the ground in Tampa. I was hanging back at home. Most of us were writing off television, and then the way you do interviews now is through Zoom. And it's been that way, in every sport. And it's not as good. It's not as effective. You don't have that same level of interaction. You can't do the same type of reporting that you would do in a locker room, where you can, get more familiar with somebody. You're face to face. You have some kind of rapport, but and you can get exclusive stuff. You can't do that right now. So you just got to play the cards you're dealt. At some point, we will be back to normal. We will be back to going to games, interviewing people in person, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been very weird. And for somebody who's used to being on the road for 100 plus nights a year, reporting, covering events, all that kind of stuff, for the last year to not really travel much, it's very strange.
I'm sure that it is when you're used to being in locker rooms or in press rooms and having the players and coaches come in. Does the league or the individual professional organizations, do they dictate um, if you get exclusive Zoom interview time, or is it as a group, or how does that work?
Well, I think everybody has their standard press conference time
Mhm.
on Zoom that any media member who covers the team can log into. If you wanted to do something separately or individually, you can always try to arrange that with the team or with an individual player or coach. Um, some of that depends on, it depends on them agreeing to do it, their interest level,
Yeah.
and whatever the story is. Not everybody cooperates the same way. If I wanted to get an exclusive or one-on-one interview, whether it's Zoom or phone or whatever, you try to arrange that, but there's no guarantees. But every college pro team league, has their designated media access periods, and they'll bring in whoever, whatever player or coach they have on the schedule. But yeah, every that's not a one-on-one thing. That's a group thing.
Yeah, I know that in my world, and I'm sure even much more so in your world, Zoom fatigue is a real thing. And meaning that nobody wants to just sit in front of a camera and all day long and answer questions. But I suspect even the athletes, but even more so, they probably do not like that any more so than they have to do it. But Dan, I want to kind of shift for a few minutes, and I appreciate your time today in answering some of my questions and things that I always wanted to ask you and others who do your type of work. Is let's move on to college sports. We've got baseball coming up, and spring training for not just college baseball, but for uh, Major League Baseball is upon us. It's February, and Major League Baseball has stated, at least for now, I think the season's going to start on time. Let's stick with college for right now. The season was just obviously cut it short, very short. Are you what are you hearing, I guess, amongst the college coaches or within the decision makers? Is the season going to look anything like it did last year, or are we going to get back to some sense of normalcy? Or are you hearing a hybrid of any of that?
I'm sorry, you're talking about college baseball?
College baseball. If I said football, I apologize.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, college baseball is not really a sport that I focus on a lot. It's it's a very sort of niche sport for a lot of schools outside the SEC.
Mhm.
There's not really much of a fan base for it anyway. So the schools generally lose money on college baseball. Except for that handful, the LSU's, the Mississippi States, Arkansas.
Mhm.
Those programs. I have not heard specifically what some of those programs are trying to do, but like everything else we've seen, colleges are still in COVID mode.
Mhm.
They're going to have games, they're going to have a season. I think each league has a little bit different model uh, from what I've seen about how they're going to approach it, but in terms of the schedule. But they are, I mean, they're going to play a season. They're going to try to have a College World Series. I'm sure they will. Uh, Being the fact that baseball is an outdoor sport and it's more socially distant in
Mhm.
general, it's like everything else. What they're more concerned about is the travel and the locker rooms and all that kind of stuff, not necessarily what happens on the field. But yeah, I don't think we'll see too many fans yet. I just don't think we're quite ready for that.
Yeah, and what about for the type of work that you're doing going forward? Do you foresee in the upcoming either weeks or months being able to get back out on the road more so than you have in the last 6 months?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'll frame it around the Olympics. The Olympics is coming up this summer in Tokyo, and what is that going to look like? They're going to have it. They're determined to have it. There's billions of dollars at stake, and they moved it back once, and I think they just are going to try to plow ahead and do it. But what kind of event is it going to be from a media standpoint? Are they going to cut back the number of people who they allow in? What are those things going to look like? And that's still months away. Um, so the amount of uncertainty we're seeing for even June and July
Mhm.
is interesting, and it's a reflection of the fact that we still have vaccinated a relatively low percentage of the population compared to what we need to sort of get back to normal. I think just sort of following what the doctors say and what the health officials say, it's going to be a process. And I'm not counting on things being normal really until the fall. By fall football season, I think you'd hope that you can aspire to have full stadiums again. Now, whether people want to go and all that stuff is a different story, but in terms of the COVID numbers, in terms of the safety. Um, I think it's still a process that we're having to work through. I'm not sure. Will we have an NBA finals? Will the NBA playoffs go back to a bubble?
Mhm.
Will the NBA finals have packed houses? Still all up in the air, and that's June and July. So, um, we've still got to get through several more months of this.
At least now the professional leagues have some history where they can look back in the prior seasons to see how things that may have worked or not worked for them. So maybe that going forward with these upcoming seasons, they'll be able to tweak their systems like the bubble, because they seem to have, for the most part, have worked fairly well for most, as long as the athletes abide by the rules. Obviously you've got some athletes that just don't want to adhere to some of those things, or things do happen. But Dan, let me just, as we get close to toward the end, I guess this is a general question about this past year. As many athletes as you've interviewed, and coaches and administrators and people with different different sports, everybody wants to get back to some sense of normalcy on the field or on the court, or off, of course. But things have changed. Our world has changed. And I guess, I don't know if this is a fair question, but from what you're being told in your interviews, are you seeing a change in mindset, I guess is the right word, by these coaches or players about how they're approaching their sports? Or are they trying to just put on a good face and just say, I'm just out here doing the best that I can, kind of a thing? Can you read that much into your interviews from what you're hearing about this, how people are approaching this?
I think there's a lot of things that people have had to adopt during COVID that will stay with them, even when we're on the other side of it in sports. Certain operational things will be permanent, and I think that's also going to be part of just life in general. I know somebody, I know somebody we were talking the other day who said, I'll never get on a plane again without a mask, even when COVID's over. And I think there's probably a lot of people who feel the same way. I mean, it's been a big change in how we live our lives on so many levels. I think athletes have, we are all adaptable as humans. They've tried to do the best they can to adapt to the circumstances. But like everybody else, like it is limiting in a way what you can do when you're in this kind of environment. And so obviously pro athletes who make a lot of money, they have it easier than a lot of people. College athletes, it's a lot tougher to handle some of the restrictions, and they're not getting paid for it. So you've seen a pretty big difference in the number of COVID cases in college football, college basketball, and NBA, NFL. And I think that probably says a lot. But it's going to come down to encouraging people to get this vaccine, to be safe, to do the best we can to try to, within this year, get back to the way things were, and hopefully people are motivated to do that.
Well, hopefully people will just continue. I dare say we're no longer in the panic and adjustment phase. I think that hopefully by now we're in the learning and adapting, and hopefully abiding by what the doctors and the professionals are recommending. But time obviously will tell. The last topic I want to bring up with you, Dan: women have finally made such great advances in all professional and some college sports this past year. GM for the Seattle Mariners. I think there were at least 2 or 3 women, and forgive me, I don't know their names, who were coaches of importance in the Super Bowl. There was a woman who was raised in Alabama. I just read about her again today, who was a referee. Sarah Fuller kicked for Vanderbilt, Power 5, scored a point and kicked earlier this year. So my question to you, and I also know that the Spurs have a very important assistant coach who is a woman. Here's my question. Do you have any predictions? Here to get your crystal ball out. When are we going to see for men's sports women being head coaches and putting into those positions?
I think you could see it in the next few years, and I think it'll start probably in the NBA. Um, you know, I think football, the NFL is probably a ways away from that, uh, and and I think college basketball, I think you could see that as well. I think somebody will try that at some point, and I think that in the NBA, especially the players in the NBA are extremely professional for the most part. They are um, now more than ever. You don't see a lot of bad guys in the NBA. The stakes are too high. The teams have just sort of not they don't tolerate it. And when guys are young and they're on that travel circuit and they're showing potential, they're sort of groomed all the way through the system to you know to handle their business very professionally. And so I think basketball players, they've shown a willingness to be coached. Becky Hammon with the Spurs is who you're mentioning. She's coached their summer league team.
Thank you.
She
I couldn't, her
coached
name
the
wasn't
game
coming to
when
mind. Thank you.
yeah, she coached the game when Greg Popovich got thrown out the other day, and she's really good. And yeah, I think it's just a matter of time. Uh, I'm not saying it's going to be something that happens a ton, but I do think that sort of whatever the stereotypes or the 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 questions about how it would work, I think that's all sort of receding into the background, and it's just more about do you think this person can do the job?
And that's the way that it should be. Hopefully, the old world mentality is leaving us, and there are more opportunities for women in sports of positions of importance. But Dan, thank you for spending some time with me today and sharing your expertise and experiences. I truly enjoyed our conversation.
No, thanks
Guys,
for having me. Appreciate it.
oh, my pleasure. Guys, as we do each week on Nomberg Law Live, it's interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise, and there's none finer than Dan Wolken at USA Today. So thank you again, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Be safe, and we will catch you again next week. Take care.